now we take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has returned to Abuja, cutting short his annual vacation abroad. Tinubu left Nigeria on September 4 for France with plans to also spend part of his working holiday in the United Kingdom. But the presidency announced on Monday that he would return ahead of schedule to resume duties. No reason was given for the change of plan. His return comes ahead of the expected reinstatement of suspended Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara, who is due back in office tomorrow following the expiration of the 6-month state of emergency imposed by the president. This came as the sole administrator of Rivers State, Vice Admiral retired Ibok Ete Ekwe Ibas, declared that the emergency rule was necessary to restore peace and stability in the face of severe insecurity, political impasse, and a breakdown of public trust.
I am filled with gratitude and humility. Gratitude for the trust and support you gave me as your administrator, and humility that I was called to serve at such a time, such a defining moment in the history of this great state. When we began this assignment on March 18, 2025, our core mandate was to restore peace and stability. By the grace of God, and with the cooperation of all stakeholders, we have come this far.
In other news, the European Union has invested over 80 million euros to boost food security and agribusiness in 7 Nigerian states. EU Ambassador to Nigeria, Gautier Mino, says the hand-in-hand initiative showcases Nigeria's commitment to strengthening agricultural value chains and driving sustainable growth. Arise correspondent Punarimam Benjamin reports.
Nigeria is among 80 nations backing the UN Food and Agriculture Organization's hand-in-hand initiative, a global effort to eliminate hunger, malnutrition and poverty through sustainable rural development. At this high-level event in Abuja, the European Union pledged over 80 million euros to deepen its partnership with Nigeria, focusing on irrigation, agribusiness, and rural transformation to drive economic growth.
In this context, I'm also pleased to highlight a new partnership between the EU and Nigeria's National Space Research and Development Agency on innovative agriculture. This project will generate critical data and information to aid and attract investment in climate-smart agricultural practices, including irrigation, water resource management, livestock development, and selected value chains across 7 ecological zones in Nigeria.
In Nigeria, the Hand-in-Hand initiative has made remarkable strides in identifying and matching investment opportunities in agriculture with interest of private sector, bilateral and multilateral developments, and international financial institutions.
Vice President Kashim Shettima identifies food insecurity as a global security threat, urging Nigeria to harness its vast agricultural potential to guarantee a future of abundance.
Our investment strategy rests on 3 solid pillars. First, every investment case is aligned with our national priorities of job creation, poverty reduction, and absolute food security. Second, we have re-engineered the enabling environment to attract and sustain capital by reforming policies and regulations, improving the ease of doing business through single-window platforms for land registration.
The Minister of Budget and Economic Planning agrees that agriculture and irrigation remain key to unlocking Nigeria's economic diversification agenda.
Animal husbandry requires more resources in the sense that rather than being the engine of economic opportunity, which you have recognized, this government have recognized by creating the livestock ministry, it remains underinvested.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Agriculture pointed to post-harvest losses, often exceeding 40% in some value chains, as a major challenge caused by inadequate processing, transport, and storage systems.
Nigeria offers one of the largest domestic markets in Africa. Rising urbanization and incomes are driving demand for processed, nutritious, and value-added products. And beyond our borders, commodities such as cocoa, sesame, cashew, ginger are already enjoying strong export demand, not only from ECOWAS, but from the African Continental Free Trade Area markets.
The Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security should come with a kind of broader program whereby not during the rainy season, but at the beginning of the rainy season, farmers should have some bags of fertilizers in their hands so that the moment the rain starts, they can actually utilize it.
This event has indicated that Africa is ready to fight food insecurity. Experts say funding is a major gap, but until that is achieved, Africa will continue to suffer from food insecurity. Punariman Benjamin, Arise News.
Well, thank you very much, Punariman. Former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Yakubu Dogara, has said President Bola Tinubu inherited nothing short of economic debris when he assumed office in May 2023. Dogara spoke yesterday in Abuja, explaining that by the time President Bola Tinubu took office, the economic debris of the nation had become too conspicuous to be ignored. Dogara, who is the chairman of the National Constitutional Governance Council, NCGC, also said the Nigeria Tax Act of 2025 represents a structural shift towards a modernized, consolidated tax system aligned with international standards. This comes as the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Senator Abubakar Atiku Bagudu, warned that Nigeria must attract at least $100 billion in combined public and private investments every year to stand a chance of achieving the ambitious goals set out in its Agenda 2050 development framework. Bagudu, who gave the warning yesterday at a one-day policy dialogue in Abuja, cautioned that without bold reforms and stronger synergy between the legislature and the executive, the country could slip further behind its peers in global economic competitiveness. All right. Okay, Rufai, a few stories here this morning. What's headline news across the nation? We look at the economy. We also look at agriculture, potential for agriculture with the EU investment, and a few other stories. Your take on this story, please.
Okay, so real quickly. It's not a bad thing when you have donor agencies bringing some money in agriculture. But the question is, for a very important tool like agriculture, is it sustainable? EU and FAO started this hand-in-hand initiative, I think around 2019. EU is a key funder and sponsor of it. They're putting some cash into it. They're pledging about 80 million. It's sort of like their give back, their charity arm. It's across parts of sub-Saharan Africa, some parts of Asia, Afghanistan, and some other countries have benefited. But you see, for us to be able to scale agriculture, we must be able to look for the problems we have in our value chain and see how we can develop. Okay, number one value chain, animal husbandry. Animal husbandry, animal production and health, animal breeding and genetics and everything. What is our ecosystem in that regard? How much is the Nigerian government putting into that? Yeah, you set up a Ministry of Livestock. It's not just about setting a Ministry of Livestock. What are you doing to animal breeding? Do you know that if you cultivate breeds of animals that are trypanotolerant or have some very good traits, you can sell them for increased amount? A vial of animal semen from an exotic breed animal costs a lot. What are you doing as regards artificial insemination? I did a lot of work on artificial insemination, so I know that that's a big viable market. So what are you doing as regards extension in animal breeding and genetics, extension in animal veterinary science and things like that? That's a core area. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry if it's properly harnessed. Then you now move to the crop parts, which has to do with cropping outlay, that has to do with security, insecurity, the farmers are not getting enough security, the cropping, access to land, I heard they were talking about land banking and things like that, and storage of food post-harvest. Because you have close to about 50% or even more, some literature will report, of post-harvest. And that means you're not producing enough because you're not getting enough yield per hectare and you're also wasting the food. See, the investment of foreign bodies will be minimal. It is you as a government that will be able to make that investment. Then you now move to another section of agriculture which has to do with the logistical value chain. What are we doing as regards that? Cold chain storage and things like that. Take, for instance, anytime I'm in Abuja, I get fresher produce than when I'm in Lagos. Why? Because from there, it's closer to the farms rather than when they bring it to the Lagos. So why is it that the strawberries that are planted in Jos, why is it difficult for you to get down south here? So that's logistics. How do we even transport our tomatoes? You see the way our tomatoes are being transported to Mile 12 in a very deplorable condition. Open air bags and things like that. Is that the best way? Can we do a cold chain storage for things like that? You see, so these are conversations. And those investments, the EU will pledge money, but they're not the one that get the job done. And that's why government needs to have a symbiotic relationship. Hence, the Minister Baguda was talking about the need for investments. So the question we should ask this government is, where are the investments you claim that was coming in? With this investment, we've heard many false stories. Just like we heard the Maersk investment at some point. Now we've heard, okay, the Saudi Arabia will pop some money in Olam. Okay, that's good. They've bought some portion of that. But what about the other investments? Okay, we hear that the Brazilian investment here, they've started talking to Ogun State as regards starting. That's good. But where are the viable investments? Because you see, in these ecosystems I've talked about, the animal breeding and genetics ecosystem, the value chain, the storage and production and everything, you need investment. Agriculture is a multi-billion-dollar investment. And this can also help to be able to diversify away from the law for crude oil and everything. Because when you look at it, in the next 50, 60 years, what will be the lot of crude oil? Will it be sustainable with the new emerging energies and things like that? And Mr. Dogara saying that, oh, President Tinubu inherited debris. I don't like it when they say that. Because you know he inherited debris, but this same President Tinubu, while campaigning, supported Buhari and said, we'll continue with the policies. So you knew you were coming in, you knew we had ways and means that were collected, that this government said they collected because they weren't able to fight COVID. And they spent billions to buy vaccines and some other things. Where is the accountability threshold as regards that? But at the same time, President Tinubu too has also, in the bid of stopping that problem, incurred more debts that we have to pay. And when he keeps saying, oh, we have to go through these hard times, where is the accountability in all of this? The first thing the president said he was going to do, he bought a jet for himself, for good measure. So you are buying a jet for yourself. People are suffering. You are running 3 concurrent budget cycles. There's a lot of problem on ground. There's massive level of insecurity. The economy, you have devalued the currency. Things are not any better for businesses and all of that. There are higher interest rates. Okay, probably now maybe the CBN will start reducing rate because they've seen a reduction in inflation numbers. So you have all these multi-problems, and you're saying people should be patient. Oh, it takes time for reform. But on your own side, the things you ought to also do to correspond with that reform, we're not seeing it to a large extent. So hence the gulf. So you see, I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson that said something. He said, what you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you say. What a lot of Nigeria are seeing is the optics of you bought yourself a private jet and other things. Till today, you've not told us the accountability as regards the humanitarian minister. Has that case been solved? You say, okay, you are paying, what's it called, conditional cash transfer. Who are those feeling the impact?
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, the big story of the day, it will appear to me, is a report that the president of Nigeria has returned from his working leave to France and the United Kingdom. When he arrived yesterday, he was received at the airport. We didn't see the usual culprits, the people who leave their states and relocate to Abuja to go and do welcoming and departure ceremonies for the president. The sculptures of the airport when the president is traveling or returning. But we saw one governor from Nasarawa State, Sule, that's his name, but he was there, maybe perhaps he will claim proximity. Yeah. The Senate president was there. But this ritual of governors going to welcome and bid farewell to the president, I think it should stop, or we'll find a way around it. Those governors should stay in their states and work on behalf of their people. They should not ridicule themselves any further. However, President Tinubu is back. We welcome him, but he has returned at a time where there are urgent national issues that he has to address and which must engage his attention. First is insecurity. while President Tinubu was away, we had issues in Borno State. All of a sudden, 4 or 5 local governments in Borno State became unsafe. The INEC voter registration process had to be relocated to Maiduguri. As you speak, Maiduguri is over-congested, which raises questions about the challenge of insecurity. In Katsina, community leaders reportedly met with some bandits, some criminals, to use the word that the Tinubu government itself adopted. And we saw the criminals, carrying AK-47 and all of that, and being negotiated with yesterday. That should be a subtle reminder to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu that as he returns, he needs to also focus on the problem of insecurity. In Zamfara State, there were also reports of bandits, insurgents, terrorists trying to overwhelm 4 local governments. But it took the gallantry of the Nigerian armed forces to overwhelm them. So that's one issue. The second issue during his 10-day absence was the point raised about the attempt to sell Nigeria's equity in joint ventures, particularly with Renaissance Energy, Wando, and Seplat. We discussed that yesterday. And we said yesterday that when Atiku Abubakar, Waziri Adamawa, former vice president, raised the point about transparency and accountability, we said that he was raising a basic principle that is unexceptionable. Can President Tinubu please address that when he returns, as he returns, to make sure that personal interest does not override sovereign interest, even when we are talking about privatization in that particular sector? The third point will be rivers. Ibakete Ibas, Vice Admiral, is beating his chest and saying he has introduced stability in River State. I wrote an informed essay on the back page of This Day yesterday, where I said, no, he has not introduced any peace. What he has introduced is a piece of the graveyard. But more importantly, the people of River State are saying that the 6-month tenure should be audited. How did Ibokete Ibas, how did he spend the money of the people of River State? He said he was going to rebuild the House of Assembly. Did he do it? How many people did he consult with? So all of that will be within the same line of transparency and accountability. Now about agric reforms. Look, government always uses agric reform as some point of propaganda. Under President Obasanjo, as head of state, military head of state, we had, Operation Feed the Nation, right? Okay, what came out of it? After him, we had Shagari talking about green revolution. After him, we had Babangida talking about, NADA? Something called NADA, Then we had President Jonathan when we had, in my own estimation, the best minister of agriculture and rural development that we have ever had, in the person of Akinwumi Additional, who went ahead and further proved himself at the African Development Bank. After that, we had a president, Muhammadu Buhari, who slept through the 8 years and did nothing about agriculture. And now we have a Tinubu president who is talking about agriculture. But what is he doing about agricultural reforms? Now, we are being told, we have money from a foreign agency. They are going to give us more money. Okay, it's not just about giving us more money. How is the Ministry of Agri funded? These are questions. 2, President Tinubu has been talking about tractors. One man came from Belarus, or wherever he came from, an old classmate of Nigeria. Yes. He showed up, they said he has supplied tractors. Now, the issue is, why are those tractors not supplied to the states, even subsidized? because the federal government of Nigeria is not the one going to do it. We have spoken on this platform about Lagos State, Zamfara, Niger State, all of them coming together and saying we are committed to agriculture. Now, what is the federal government doing to support them? Tractors are like airplanes. You have collected tractors from Belarus. They are there. If you don't deploy them, those tractors will go to waste because they are mechanical structures. So why is it a problem to collaborate with the state governments and put these tractors to use? The other issue that they will have to deal with will be about access to land. The federal government doesn't own land. Land under the Land Use Act is held in trust by the states. Now, what are they doing to make sure that these state governments provide land to make agriculture possible? So all this political propaganda about agriculture without taking the consequential steps is just, you know, what it is, propaganda. I don't want to use a stronger word. Now, let me go quickly to Minister Bagudu, Minister of National Planning and Budget. He is an investment banker. So if he says Nigeria needs $100 billion in terms of investment annually, you know, he knows what he's talking about, probably. Okay, so we ask him, all these trips that we have been supporting, we say President Tinubu is the chief foreign policy officer, is the chief marketer of the country. Okay, how much investment has this government been able to bring? They went to Qatar. How much has Qatar brought? They went to Saudi Arabia. How much has Saudi Arabia brought? They went to India. How much have they brought home? They went to Japan. How much have you received? They went to Brazil. We need a proper audit of what has been brought in terms of investment and sectorally. It's not enough to just tell us that investments, we need this investment, we need that investment. So what are they bringing? However, the rub of it is about local investment. I think the Nigerian government under President Tinubu contradicts itself when it says we're looking for foreign investment, we need industrialization. When local investors are being put under pressure, and that takes me to the issue of Dangote refinery. Look at the stress that Dangote refinery is going through. These are local people trying to invest in the environment and who believe in Nigeria and Africa and who say that the best way that you can develop the country is for you to support your own private sector. The people who are trying to invest in Nigeria, they have been subjected to a lot of hardship. Now that the president is back, the investment that they are looking for overseas, which they have not brought, we only just have promises. We have not seen the impact. We have not seen the effect. The people who are trying to invest in this country, they deserve support. The harassment that Dangote refinery is receiving should be another issue that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu should address as he returns to work this morning.
All right, let me start with River State. Again, welcome back, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Even though, like I mentioned earlier on, there hasn't been a reason for why he cut short his working vacation to France and the UK. A number of people have said it's good timing or perfect timing. Tomorrow being 18th of September 2025 and 6 months to the expiration of the state of emergency declared in River State and the restoration of the elected governor of the state, Siminalayi Fubara. Perhaps it's a good coincidence that he's back to oversee a smooth transition. Isn't it interesting and ironic that under a democratic government, we're coming in from a sole administrator back to the elected democratic governor? But it's ironic as well that the sole administrator made this statement at a public lecture titled Democracy and Good Governance. And I thought, oh, how is that poetic in its way? Because when we're looking at democracy or democratic structures in Rivers State, in the last 6 months, a lot of criticism has talked about how we have derailed the progress of democracy in the state by the installation of a sole administrator without, in some questionable cause. Some people might say, okay, well, the security and the stability that Vice Admiral Ibas is talking about, we haven't seen anything like that of the sort. In fact, we've seen more instability and security threats in some parts of the country, particularly in the north, where a state of emergency was not called. But why Rivers State in particular? And that's why some people have said, well, when I say some people, I mean in the opposition, as reported in the papers this morning, who have come out to say that Vice Admiral Ibas was doing the bidding of the president, and in fact, post his tenure in office, he should be subjected to a probe. The monies he spent, recall that some of the legacies he's leaving behind, if we're looking back, was the controversial sacking of the board members of parastatals, also the execution of the local council elections, even though he's continuously maintained that it was a peaceful election, it was a good election. But we analyzed the outcome of the election. We talked about voter apathy. We looked at almost a selection process as opposed to an election process. We had some of the elders of Rivers State come out to talk about how the same criticism that was had during Governor Fubara's time of the 90-day period, 90-day notice that ought to have been given before an election was executed was not done, and nothing happened. So it questions perhaps the kind of democracy that's happening in Rivers State. But even also importantly is what next for Governor Fubara on resumption of office tomorrow. The APC spokesperson in Rivers State had suggested to him that he should join the APC quickly so that he will be the leader of the APC in Rivers State. Is that going to be perhaps a viable option for him? Are we going to see another governor from the PDP, Jakpa from PDP to the APC now that he's come into power, in gratitude to the president for how he helped him to manage a state that the people put in trust to him to be able to execute as governor? How is he going to work with the State House of Assembly now that we see that many of the people who are in that State House of Assembly and many of the elected officials of the local government council are people who are loyal to his predecessor, Mr. Nyesom Wike? How is he going to manage the state of politics in Rivers State on resumption? Is he just going to sit quietly through the 2 years and ruffle no feathers so that we do not have another case of a state of emergency? So these things are the things that we're looking at. And then how is he going to earn again the trust of the Rivers people? A number of people who felt disappointed at the way in which he handled matters, or perhaps how docile he was in the face of opposition by his predecessor. A number of things to look at as to whether or not his last 2 years in office, if he does not seek a re-election, would be successful, would be quiet, would finally work for the Rivers people, the rebuilding of the State House of Assembly. A lot of work cut out for him. The politics of it on one hand, his decision of whether or not he will remain in the PDP or accede to the suggestion made by the APC spokesperson in Rivers State and finally join the APC party as leader of the state of Rivers State. Now, moving away from that, let's talk about Mr. Dogara and what he says. Beyond talking about inheriting a bad economy, the truth is that he talks about ways and means that was abused under the last administration. We keep mentioning the fact that the last administration was an APC government, and a number of these people were quiet when these things were happening. So why now? What has triggered this openness and ability to come out to criticize the way the last government was run? It means that perhaps there's still some people in government who might see things that are not working well, but because their interests are not in line with that, they keep quiet and watch Nigerians suffer and languish and not say anything until a new government comes in. It is the same APC government, and I believe that 2 years post-election, the Tinubu administration has had enough time to move away from complaining about the fact that they inherited a bad economy. What have they done? Unfortunately, the moves that have been made so far do not, in some quarters, yes, they beat their chest and say that we have done well, the economy is on the path to success, and in fairness to them, a number of institutions have come out to support that claim. But Nigerians, who are the main stakeholders, have not been able to agree to that because hardship is rife in the country. A lot of people are talking about the price of food and their ability to purchase. We're looking at the national minimum wage. We're looking at the implementation of the national minimum wage. We're looking at the income of disposable income for many Nigerians. We're looking at some of the promises that have been made and not kept by this administration. And so when we look at the previous administration, it is time, I do think, 2 years post-election, post-inauguration, that the Tinubu administration takes ownership and begins to talk about how, and stop talking about the previous administration and move forward to see what their own policies are doing for Nigerians and the Nigerian people. I believe on that note, we'll talk about this later. We have another guest coming on later on the show to speak about the river situation. What next? Not just reviewing and talking about a probe of the IBAS administration in quotes, but looking forward as to what is next for Governor Fubara. How is he going to govern the state? Do the people still trust in him as the leader that can take River State to the promised land?